Welcome to module number 1. We would be covering session number 6 of module number 1 in this particular recording. The name of the session is Apply and Analyze the Principles. So we'll kind of study the 7 principles, or rather the 8 principles in slightly greater detail in this particular module. Now, principle number 1 is align with objectives. Now, the key message is MOR provides leadership and governance to achieve the objectives that are at risk over time. So the key word being providing leadership and governance to achieve the objectives that are at risk over time. Now, multiple situations are uncertain, but risk management is concentrated only on the uncertainties which have the potential to affect one or more objectives achievement. As I stated earlier on, let's say, for example, if we are talking about project risk management, so there could be a lot of uncertainties within the organization, but then what is relevant in the context of aligning with objectives is the objectives within that particular project. Any risk that would impact the other objectives outside the ones within the project would not be of some relevance for us. As a result, organizations should understand the objectives that are at risk and define the performance indicators that can be utilized to express the way much risk to that objective is tolerable. Now, let's say, for example, the objective of a particular project that we are working on is to, let's say, reduce patient harm. Now, how much of harm to the patient is tolerable? Let's say, for example, let's say we have zero tolerance towards any injuries to patients or any harm to patients, and therefore every risk that would impact patient harm would be considered as a very high risk. So we need to kind of align the risk to the objectives of the project or the program or the perspective that we are working in. Some additional thoughts. Only with this risk management can allow a suitable balance between enhancing opportunities and decreasing threats. Now, if we do not have objectives in place, it's very difficult for us to bring about a balance between opportunities and threats. Objectives may change as well as risk management, and there should be an alignment with the objectives, with the changing objectives, and kind of respond to changes in a way which is controlled. A fundamental aspect of risk management is a shared knowledge among stakeholders that risk is dynamic and not static. I think that's a very key understanding. I mean, risk does change in probability, risk does change in impact. It is not static, it is dynamic. Therefore, risk management should be a continuous process that expects and is responsive to change in an organization or its broader context to align with objectives. Well, what is the main outcome of this principle? The main outcome of satisfying the align with objectives principle is that the risks that are prioritized for management action are the biggest potential to protect or improve current value. And the following points achieve the principle. Leaders being clear regarding objectives. There has to be a clarity on what the objectives are. What are the investment objectives? Why is it that we are investing? Let's say, for example, you're investing in a solution so that there is a better compliance. You're investing in a solution that that would bring about greater operational efficiencies, for example. Or you're investing in a solution that would bring about some traceability. So there has to be a clarity on the objectives. It is only then we could be able to, track the risks on the initiative. So leaders are being clear regarding objectives, ability, as well as risk appetite to those objectives. Governance defining ownership and delegated authority for each and every objective. That's an important point to achieve this principle. A risk management process is continuously applied to reflect changes to objectives with time. So those were a few thoughts on aligning with objectives. So please make sure that you define your objectives first of all, depending upon what perspective that you're working in. If you're working in a product perspective, you need to define what the product objectives are. If you're working in a project perspective, you got to define what project objectives are. If you're working in an operational perspective, you got to define what the operational objectives are. It is only then you could kind of effectively manage risks. That was what the preceding principle was all about, aligning with objectives. The second principle that we have on this particular slide is fits the context. The key message is MOR provides guidance on tailoring risk management so that it is appropriate to the objectives at risk over time. The external and internal context are critical determinants of the required risk management's extent as well as type. For the organization, the external context involves the sector, locations, markets, technologies, regulatory regimes, and societal expectations that give the backdrop for the performance of the organization. The internal context involves the strategy, formal as well as informal structures, the relationship between stakeholders, and the processes and incentives deployed overall are within the organization's part. So it's good to kind of carry out risk management within the context of the internal and external environments of the organization. Now, for any organization, the context is dynamic and should be understood for effective risk management. In the external context, changes will introduce new upside as well as downside risk to objectives. A simple example is in the context of COVID-19, we have seen a lot of businesses being impacted. At the same time, certain industries, let's say the healthcare industry, could kind of capitalize on coming out with digital solutions, digital ways of working, digital transformation, and that's an upside. They may also need different stakeholders, new investments and change to be initiated, or various risk techniques to be applied. Changes to internal context may result in changes to roles, responsibilities, ways of working, or performance measures. A lot of organizations are going through massive restructurings these days. As a result of these restructurings, we got to kind of have a keen observation in terms of what risks would this particular restructuring or changes in the internal context bring about on the initiatives that we are working on. Risk management can be successful only if it is proportionate to the context and tailored to the areas that pose the most significant risk and where necessary decisions are made. Now, one size fits all does not work in the context of risk management. We got to understand the size, the complexity, and the scale of the initiative that we are working on, and we got to make sure that we tailor those approaches to the context, which it should be proportionate to the context. The main outcome of satisfying the fitting the context principle is that investment in risk management allows the organization to make effective decisions to remain relevant for the least effort. And this particular principle, which is fit the context, is achieved by a risk management process that evaluates external as well as internal context explicitly, leadership that is flexible and ready to adjust so the risk management is fit for the context, continuous focus on whether risk management actions as well as activities are designed to add value. So these are the ways in which this particular